Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 55 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got, this is a community edition, so every other week community. The other week would be a corporate edition. I got Patrick Toner, one of our solutions architect and our IGEL subject matter experts, at least on the pre-sales side as XenTegra. Patrick, how's it going?
Going good, going good. Glad to be here. We're finally in Florida, in our house. So, as I've realized, I've given updates on each podcast here, but we are finally in our house. It's kind of an amazing thing. So, but glad to be here this morning.
Congratulations. Hopefully that lasts as long as you want, whether it's 1 year or 30, whatever you think.
I've already told my wife I'm never moving, again. So and we'll see what happens. In a few years, she might be able to. She's done it to me twice already, where I said I was never moving. I think this time, I think she's even in that camp though. It's been an adventure to get here. So,
yeah, I think the topic of 1 year or 30 years and mortgages and how we do it in the United States, we mortgage where you own your house, which technically you don't own your house. The bank owns your house, and technically the bank doesn't even own your house. The government owns your house. If they really wanted it, they come take it. But conceptually, you own your house. We're going to talk about IGEL licensing here in a minute, where you owned it, or now it's a subscription potentially. And so I want to go into that as soon as we introduce our superstar here. Seb, how's it going?
Oh, the superstar couldn't join, so I'm there now. Thanks for asking. I'm doing good. It's my last week before vacation, as I already told Patrick, so I'm feeling pretty good, a bit tired, but also really happy to leave all that mess behind me.
Yeah, where are you going on vacation?
Back to my original country. So I'm coming back to France for a couple of days, and I will join my mother there, going swimming, surfing on the Atlantic Sea. So recharging a little bit my batteries.
So this kind of the south of France beach scene, that's what I'm envisioning in my head. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it looks exactly like that. We are all drinking wine, we are all eating red bread and cheese, and we are singing some funny songs. That's exactly what we are doing in France when we are at the beach. It's not far from the reality, I must say.
Very good.
So I'm working from the back porch here at the condo today. That's my water view.
Is that Lake Norman?
Pretty good. It's not the south of France. Yeah, it's Lake Norman.
It's close to the south of France.
You guys get plenty of fireworks, 3 nights of fireworks. Patrick, I guess.
I did.
I guess you probably didn't get a lot of 4th of July fireworks there, huh?
Yeah, I'd imagine that's not the case for Seb, but yeah, it was great here. We were exhausted by the time we moved, but it was the kids came into our bedroom and there was just fireworks going off in every direction. So we just kind of opened the windows, had a nice little private fireworks show. It was nice, very nice.
Yeah, Seb, I don't know if you know. Well, Patrick lives in Florida now. I don't know if you know much about the state of Florida, but it has its own way of thinking. Like several other states in the United States, North Carolina is not that way, but a little. But Florida definitely. They like to blow stuff up.
They were going I think until midnight, and it was just socially acceptable here. So.
Oh yeah. It's got to be a big difference for you, Patrick.
Big time, big time. Coming from New Jersey, night and day.
I guess Will Smith didn't have to save the Earth yesterday because I didn't see any kind of alien invasion. So I was expecting that the Independence Day went pretty fluently on your side.
I wonder if a bunch of the rest of the world thinks of that when they think U.S. Independence Day.
I can speak for Germany. We all think about Will Smith when we hear 4th of July Independence Day, to be honest.
How about that?
Well, listen, we talked about owning homes a while ago, and I kind of pointed out you really don't own it until you own it. And even then, you don't own it. The country kind of owns it in a roundabout way, but you still pay taxes to live there. And that's okay. We got a decent amount of freedom here in the United States and other places. But Patrick, if you would, to the best of your ability, walk us through the history of IGEL licensing all the way back to, when it was a thin client and then it became software and then it became, I don't want to steal your thunder. Try the best you can to tell us the history of IGEL OS licensing.
Sure. Yeah. So I won't go all the way back to OS 5. It predates me a little bit. I wasn't in IGEL world at that point, but when I got involved with IGEL back in 2017-ish or something like that, IGEL was on OS 10. And basically with OS 10, there was 2 ways you could use IGEL. One was you could buy the hardware. The license was attached to the device. So I could go out and buy an IGEL thin client, it would come already licensed. I would just have to keep it maintenance or whatever. And that would work fine. And then there was also the separate product called the
Patrick, before you say that, so when you just highlight the maintenance part, so you would have to pay annually or every 3 years to keep it under software maintenance.
Yeah, and I believe that was the way. I think that was the case with the hardware, if I'm remembering correctly. There may not have. I mean, maybe Seb knows this. There may not have been maintenance on the hardware.
I can jump in on the hardware. There was everything perpetual on OS 10. So you bought your device one time, and it was able to get updates inside of the OS 10 release forever.
Forever, got it. Yep. So that was actually owning your house in the analogy there. But then there was this separate utility in OS 10 called Universal.
Can I highlight something real quick? That's owning your house, but paying homeowners association dues to be able to maintain the house and live in it.
Well, what would the HOA? I'm not even sure if there was anything because there wasn't maintenance on the hardware, is what Seb said. So basically, it would be like you bought the hardware, it's already licensed, and you just update it until the hardware dies.
So you didn't have to pay for a continuous updating on the software piece?
Nope. That was one of the biggest change inside of the OS 11 licensing, but I don't want to interrupt Patrick. So no, obviously that was one of the main reasons we said we have to change that. Not only because we want to make our customers unhappy, but more because we need some revenue based on the effort that we have to deliver to bring in security updates, new client updates, and so on and so on.
So Patrick lives in Florida now. They call them the good old days.
That would be the good old days. Now the downside to that was, if your hardware died, you lost your license. So you basically had to buy a brand new piece of hardware with that license, again. So it was there was a trade-off. But OS 10 also allowed you to convert devices. Back then it was called UDC, the Universal Desktop Converter. So you could convert third-party hardware, and then on those devices you would pay the maintenance, to get updates. And then I think it was back in 2019, I believe it was, beginning of 2019, IGEL moved to OS 11. And OS 11 completely separated out the hardware from the software, right? So even if you bought IGEL hardware now, you would buy it bare metal, and all of and there was some, some trade-offs. There was things that were good about it. Some things like maybe some customers liked buying the hardware and having to pay no maintenance, just running it forever. But at least now, when they bought that new hardware, the license would transport if the hardware died, which was big. However, now you pay the maintenance fee. So it doesn't matter if you were converting devices or if you're buying IGEL hardware; it was all licensed exactly the same. And that takes us to really today.
Let's pause there real quick. So that's not subscription. That is, you own it, but you got to keep it up. You got to keep paying if you want to keep it up to date. Kind of like with the HOA example I gave, where your homeowners, you got to keep paying your homeowners association, and maybe even slightly different, because in the HOA situation, if you don't pay it, they could come kick you out. But that allows you to keep it relevant. Now, did you pay slightly less for it now that you're going to have to keep paying forever, or was it
Small increase, you mean? From what I recall, it was a small increase. But nevertheless, it was about, 5 to 6%. It wasn't something extremely huge. So that was something that was then kept back from the salespeople and made some reductions on the price. But basically, yes, it wasn't a huge amount.
Well, let's pause on that topic real quick, because I know we got a lot of listeners that they just want things to be the best they can be in terms of for the company that is the consumer of it. And the truth is, at the end of the day, these are all businesses. And for example, I've got this little one-wheel thing, a toy that I have, and I was with a guy the other day that said he would never buy the one I have because it's proprietary. He would buy the old one because you could do all the modifications yourself. And that's great for him. But if I'm a business and I'm trying to stay in business, I've got to do things to make make it revenue generating. One, to stay in business, and two, to make investors happy, which is just modern day business, and it's how the world works.
Yeah, I've worked with customers who go on that proprietary model, right? And it's like, what if the one guy who has all the knowledge, he gets hit by a bus, this major corporation's in trouble, right? So yeah, to your point, Andy, it's good to you got to partner with companies who, and there is a cost to that.
Well, my one thing that I will give, well, many things, but one specific thing I'd call out about IGEL. Yes, they are, trying to be a for-profit, running a healthy business. At the same time, they're still investing in community and other things that their competition doesn't. So some of that money that you might think is going into the pockets of jet airs, I say that jokingly, is going into building a community and making a sustainable company for all of us. And so it's not just all corporate greed.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Patrick, we got this world where we buy a license, but then in order to keep that we buy a software license specifically in whatever hardware you want. But you buy that software license specifically in order to keep it up to date. You have to keep maintenance on that license. That's where we were. And then I think maybe now we're moving to yet the next evolution of that. That's coming really soon.
Yeah, and the other thing to mention there too, between 10 and 11, so yeah, you would have the maintenance. It's it just simplified things. So even though it was, a little bit different than the 10 model, 10 also had all these other add-on licenses. It was like 5 or 6 of them. And it was just confusing. There was a lot of licenses when you talk to customers. If they wanted, for example, IGEL Cloud Gateway and another feature, they'd have to buy 3, they'd have to buy 2 add-on licenses. So with 11, it everything shrunk down to 2 licenses. You had the perpetual license with what's called Workspace Edition, and that's the one you pay maintenance on yearly to keep updates. And then if you wanted any of the premium features, something like IGEL Cloud Gateway, Asset Inventory Tracker, there's a handful.
Workspace.
They all shared workspace, another big one. They would all get bundled into this one license called EMP, Enterprise Management Pack. So it really simplified things quite a bit. And that one that is a subscription license, EMP. That's a yearly subscription. So it's probably worth noting that too. I mean, that was a huge change from 10 to 11. And obviously going to 12 now, even more so, that'll be changing. So
I want to highlight something. I think one of you guys said it right, one of them said it wrong, or maybe you both said it right or both wrong, but shared workplace
yes.
Is essential. I mean, for me, Patrick and I are getting ready to do this within XenTegra. I need shared workplace as part of my offering, and having that is something I know it's just going to be looped into my subscription as a customer would be hugely important. So if you're listening to this and you don't know what shared workplace is, we did a podcast on it, but this is going to make that easier to be part of your. So Patrick, that's it, right? I mean, that's where we've been. That's where we're going in the very, very near future. And then now we need to learn from Seb what this blog/vlog that he's put out. Is it, Seb? Is it tied to the good old days? Is it tied to the most recent days, or is it tied to where IGEL's going, or does it cover all the above?
At the moment, it's covering everything: the good old, the actual, and the upcoming ones. So I can't speak too much about the actual one because we would have a separate meetup together with our sales staff ops to explain what the subscription-based licensing that we are delivering since 1st of July will include. But for, let's say, the actual state until 1st of July, where we had exactly that perpetual license, the maintenance, the EMP add-on, and the old times, we have to think back about the way how IGEL delivered licenses to the endpoints. Mm-hmm. First of all, we speak about files. There is no API. There is no communication channel on the endpoint where you exchange your license files between the licensing portal that we have, the IGEL licensing portal, and the endpoint. Everything is done via files. So you transfer a file automatically via the UMS to the endpoint, and then the endpoint is knowing, oh, I'm licensed with that feature set. And that's extremely important. And that's the reason why I created the blog, to be clear. Creating a task to delete automatically licenses is something which is quite impossible at the moment. Why should I say that? The goal from a customer would be, we have a licensing portal where all my devices, all my licenses are assigned. I'm deleting the device there, and I would expect that the UMS, the endpoint, will reflect that deletion. It isn't. It isn't automatically. You have to do some manual tasks. And that's what I'm covering in that tutorial. And I must mention that obviously we're working on that, right? So don't expect that it will stay there forever, especially if you think about UMS 12 and OS 12. It's something that we have on our roadmap since a long time. And we will definitely work on it for the upcoming versions. So it's not meant to be there forever.
So Seb, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through your video, and if you could talk over it, what's happening on the
Please.
screen. Assume that
Yeah.
people can't see it, so be detailed in your description. And Patrick, feel free to chime in. If my audio gets weird, it's because when I start playing this, it makes the Zoom act funny on my end at least. But Seb, I'm gonna hit play here and probably speed it up slightly so you're not having to labor your comments. But walk us through what you're doing in the video as if somebody could hear it but not see it, and then hopefully people go back later and watch the video.
I will. So what I'm covering in the first introduction is that I'm explaining why I'm doing that. And that's basically what we did during the introduction, but we have a couple of reasons more why you want to delete a license from an endpoint. Basically, you have a wrong license information, or you might have a device which is 5-10 years old, where you have a lot of licenses deployed locally, and yeah, you have the feeling that something is not working like expected. And that's where you want to make a cleanup and delete every license which is not used by the device anymore. Obviously, if you're delivering new licenses, if you want to deliver new maintenance, it works in 99% of all cases, yeah, right? The device will catch up the new maintenance, the new license, and everything is working fluently. But we have still small percentages of issues where the device is still stuck with the old information, so the old license. That's the reason why even a factory reset of the device, that's just a fun fact, is not deleting the license. So if you are saying that we reset the device to factory defaults from an IGEL perspective, it doesn't mean that the licenses will be deleted. That's a huge issue, in my opinion. And it's on our roadmap to cover that in an upcoming version. But for the moment, we don't have that.
And so, Seb, on that one, right? So you can you reset the device. It tells you, I think, that it's going to keep the license, at least. Or isn't there also the ability to tell the device that, hey, you're going to get a new license, but that doesn't do anything on the back end to tell the back end what just happened?
Right. So basically, the device will stay with the feature set, even if you reset it from factory defaults locally. This warning that you are telling is when you reset the device to reset to factory defaults the device locally, or if you re-image the device by using the OS creator. It will ask you if you want to migrate the licenses or not. But in the standard case, when we are doing a checkout, like a device needs to be removed from factory, needs to be removed from your stock, you would expect that it will also delete the license locally as soon as you delete the device. So to our audience, no, it isn't the case. So if someone would fire up exactly that device somewhere else, far away from your UMS, far away from your IGEL Cloud Gateway, it will still work. So that's something to consider until the moment where we have a proper integration of that license removal, that if you want to remove a device, you have to perform a few steps which are available via profile. So that's something I will cover in a couple of seconds. So coming back to what you're seeing on the screen, I just opened the activation portal, which is our IGEL licensing portal, which is a web page where your complete license balance from IGEL is described. So that's where you get your enterprise management pack, your workspace edition, your maintenance assigned automatically by our order processing, and where you would look for a hardware that you want to remove from your licensing balance, because hardware is defective or went to another customer and you want to move that. So basically, you would like to remove the license from the license portal. You go to your pack, to your product pack, you search for the hardware, and then you remove the hardware from the pack. You have to confirm a small user license agreement that you are doing that in the right context and that the license will be deleted locally. And now you would expect that by using the UMS licensing ID or the automatic licensing deployment, that the UMS will recognize all that step and will perform a local deletion of the license. And that's not the case. And that's what we will cover in a couple of seconds. So you can definitely fast forward a little bit. Now I'm just showing that the device is still keeping the license and that the license is just removed from our ALD. And if you look at the licensing information of your endpoint, so you go to your IGEL UMS console, you go to your main device that you want to look at, you have your main window where you're looking at the asset information that you want to look at. You see that the device is still holding the license that you just removed, even if the license balance is showing that it's not there anymore. The local about window, which is usually enabled on your IGEL endpoint, if not disabled somewhere else, will tell you also that the device is holding a license. And that's where we will perform a couple of steps. So you can fast forward to the next step, Andy, please. Right, so just a little bit backwards. I'm opening a local terminal, so you can go to the IGEL setup or in a profile, go to accessories, terminal, and add a terminal session, which is a command line with a plus button. You log in as a root user, and then there is a mount point, which is called license with a.
Hey Seb, let's take this moment to tell all of our listeners that if you can get to a terminal, which may or may not be able to happen, but if they can get to one and or SSH and then log in as root, with root being the username / password, go back and listen to a previous podcast where we told you how to fix that and turn that off.
Yeah, exactly. So the root user I'm speaking about, thank you, Andy, for pointing it out, is the administrative user of your endpoint. Yeah, sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's probably worth mentioning too, like the this is so the IGEL OS is a read-only partition, file system, but there are certain partitions that are writable. So this one you're showing them here would be a writable partition and something that persists through a reboot.
It's definitely not writable by default, but that's exactly what I will do in a couple of seconds. It's remounting that partition in a writable mode. Okay. So I'm just describing on the screen how to get there. So it's /license /DSA/licenses. So that's the path to the license files. And there you have a couple of lick files. That lick files are the files that I mentioned at the beginning. It's all the license files that the UMS will deploy to your endpoint via different mechanisms. And also the EMP. So even the subscriptions are there. So what we are doing there is trying to delete a specific lick file because I want to check out that device, and I just tried to remove it with a command which is called rm, and then the name of the lick file. The screen will tell you that the file system is read-only, which is great because you don't want to be able to manipulate any kind of files in the file system, like Patrick mentioned. And that's the reason why I'm using a command that is called mount, which is basically available on every Linux distribution, even Unix, where you can integrate a drive, integrate a partition, integrate a file system into your computer. And I'm just remounting the mount point, which is called license, so /license, into RW, which is read and write mode. And then I'm able to delete that license. So now you might ask, is that really such complicated? Yes and no. That's a step that you can perform if we speak about one device and you want to test something by your own. Just be aware that we have profiles pre-configured on our knowledge base, which as soon as you import them into the UMS and assign them to a device, will delete a specific use case, like only the EMP, only the workspace edition, all licenses, and so on and so on. So just in case, if you want to do that, what we are showing on the screen is what is automated in the profiles, but sometimes not available if you want to do it by your own on the endpoint because you don't have the syntax by hand. So I'm just then remounting the partition in a read-only mode, which is what we expect to be the standard. It would set to read only again after a reboot. But if you want to use the device immediately for something, I'm recommending to do that before working on the partition. So what I'm doing now is to just double check that the enterprise pack was integrated into the license file. Hold on a second. I'm checking if the validity is still there. I'm seeing a small mistake in the video, by the way. So if you are seeing that, I'm putting everything in one row. It's something that you might not even notice, but I'm putting the read write and putting the deletion of enterprise packs in one line. And that's basically what we are doing in the profiles that we're delivering on the knowledge base. So I'm just double checking now that what I wanted to get deleted is definitely away. And that's what I'm confirming right now, that I have just my workspace edition feature set left instead of all the enterprise measurement pack information that I had before. That sounds pretty complicated.
Seb, say that last piece again. You're checking that you only have what remaining?
I only have my workspace edition and my maintenance left. Since the goal of my IGEL licensing portal deletion was to remove a device from an enterprise management pack. So what Patrick mentioned, shared workspace, asset inventory tracker, and Azure Cloud Gateway. Yeah. And I'm now wanting to double check that it's definitely gone locally.
And that could be like you have 1,000 licenses and you have 800 of them using workspace and only 200 of them using workspace and enterprise pack, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I know it's painful, I know it's complicated and it's a little bit complex, but by using the profiles, it's getting a little bit easier, even if it's not perfect. And I can just repeat myself, we are working on it. We get that feature asked quite often in the Azure community. We are getting it even more often from the customer base on enterprise customers, and we are working on it, I promise.
So is that part of the moving to subscription and using APIs, or just make those types of things more controllable and seamless from the end user perspective, and really more on the the systematic side to be able to handle going forward?
Yeah, that's exactly the goal. And we are doing a great step in that direction by using our new licensing model, since we don't have to deliver up to 3 or 4 different files for different use cases. We just have one subscription, which is doing more or less everything, and that helps in that direction. And as soon as we will launch the UMS 12 and OS 12, which is still a little bit secret, we do expect that quite soon after GA.
Yeah. Hey, if I could suggest maybe a title change here, how to remove an IGEL OS license from the portal and the device. Because as you started going through that, I was like, yeah, this is very device centric. And then I said, well, no, he started in the portal. So I don't know. You're
vague, you're right.
But it's probably like if I was a sysadmin looking for specifically what you just did, I might gloss over this, and it really was valuable content.
That's definitely true. Thank you for pointing that out.
Or let's see if you maybe say it down here. Yeah, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Say it later.
I have the Azure UMS license portal command line, but it wasn't mentioned such clearly. That's true.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, Patrick, you've seen this. Comments, questions around what Seb just did? Further acknowledgement?
Yeah, it's just something that I've had to use not frequently, but periodically through the years, right? Because you do come into situations. Seb mentioned the starter license, for example. Sometimes users, they just want to test that IGEL, they get the starter license. That's good for, I think, what is it, Seb, like 2 weeks out of the box, something like that. It's just a very stripped down version of the license that none of the unified communications will work, none of the codecs will work, but it gets you, a quote unquote working solution where you can do some basic things. But sometimes when you have the starter license in place, I've seen where the user's like, okay, now I want to pull a demo license, or now I want to pull a production license. And there's a weird disconnect because the OS is not looking for a new license. So you have to go in there and remove the starter license. So it's definitely a useful, this is a useful process. If you go from OS 10 to OS 11, you might run into some of those issues, or you might just want to clean it up. You might have 3-4 different licenses in there and just say, hey, I just want to clean up all the ones I'm not using, get them out of there. Definitely a useful process here.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Thank you. This is stuff I needed to see and know how to refer back to as we have clients that come across these types. As you said, as always, really good job making it digestible and relevant.
I hope so. And yeah, just saw that you're using a Chromebook. Why not IGEL OS, by the way?
Actually, I'll pull this out. It has one of these in the USB slot, and I can't remember why I didn't use it. But this morning I woke up, not in my house, not in my office, and this is the only device I have here. So for the sake of time, I forget what it was, but I think it was something. Oh, I know what it was. I can boot from this thing, but Google makes it really hard to boot from it easily every time. So I have to go in and do some kind of, at least to my knowledge, I have to go in and do some type of reconfiguring of the BIOS frequently in order to keep it booting from this. I'm trying.
Okay, got it.
But it's not an IGEL thing. It's a Google thing where they made it more difficult. So I just roll with it. But if I go to my office,
Okay.
there's a 34-inch LG all-in-one booting from IGEL. So next week I'll be on.
Love it. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, guys. Appreciate the time. I got to jump to another call real quick. But as always, thanks for the content and being part of the community.
I'm happy to be there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Seb, I guess go enjoy your vacation next week.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very
Patrick's
much.
in
I will
Florida. He
enjoy.
lives on vacation now.
Yeah. I'll let you know when the vacation starts when I'm done moving. I'll maybe another 2 months here.
I don't envy that at all. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Hey, see you guys.
You too. Bye-bye.